And as I said today, rather than having a speaker provide the platform address, I will be facilitating a discussion about our thoughts and feelings during these past 4 years, and especially this last week of the election process, which was just like an emotional roller coaster. I mean, nail biting. I have no nails left down to my cuticles. So today, thankfully, not only are we celebrating the end of Donald Trump and a return to normalcy, but also our first African-American, South Asian woman vice president. And I don't know about all of you, but I am so excited about that. I'm wearing white to symbolize the suffragettes. So we need to celebrate that. That is really big. So I just want to go back a little bit. And some of us here today all remember too well election night, 2016, when we gathered at our ethical culture building, expecting to celebrate the election of our first woman president. How well I remember the tension that night in the room. Just like, and the somberness when we shockingly learned the results. It was like afterwards just being at a funeral. I mean, you could hear a pin drop. Nobody was talking. Yeah, it was just awful. I think as bad as we knew Donald Trump was, nobody was prepared for what was to come. It's been 4 long years of fighting so many atrocities. The ban of Muslims coming into our country, the attack of all immigrants, the degradation of people of color, of people with disabilities, of those who fought in our wars, really of anybody who defied this wannabe king, this sociopath. The march in Charlottesville, the worst was the separation of children from their parents. And we still, as we sit here today and we're celebrating, we cannot forget that there are so many children who don't know where their parents are, parents who may never see their children again. This to me was unbearable and still is unbearable. So there has been so much damage done in this 4 years. And, you know, we can breathe a little more easily, but we have a lot of work yet left to do. So now, after 4 years, it really feels like the pressure cap has been released for over 75 million people. Last night, as you know, there was literally dancing in the streets everywhere in every city. When it was announced that Joe Biden was president-elect, I mean, we knew it was coming, we saw it, but when it was announced, I just sobbed. I sobbed and sobbed. I couldn't stop. It really was like the pressure was just released. 4 years. Now, I don't know how many of you saw the Van Jones on CNN. He's a Black commentator. Last night, right after Joe Biden was announced, Anderson Cooper turned to him and said, "Van, what are your thoughts?" Oh my God. I want to thank Amy Cass for posting it on our ethical culture site. If you haven't seen it, I recommend you either Google Van Jones or go on our site and look at it. What he said was this. He expressed what it was like to be Black during these 4 years. And as he was sobbing, as he was speaking, he struggled to speak through his tears as he said, "It's easier to be a parent today. It's easier to be a dad. It's easier to tell your kids character matters. It matters to tell the truth. It matters to be a good person." He was saying this as he was sobbing and having trouble even saying the words. This is a vindication for a lot of people who have really, really suffered. And I close quotes. Those were Van's words. And I think he expressed really what it has been like. We as whites, we know, I mean, you know, we've seen how bad it was, but I don't think we can really appreciate just how horrible it was for people of color in this country, for immigrants, for Muslims, for Latinos, so much worse for them. Such a relief. And by the way, it was the Black woman vote. They really came out in droves. So I hope Joe Biden doesn't forget that. And yay, Stacey Abrams, Georgia on my mind. I mean, that is amazing. As excited as I am about having a woman vice president, Georgia going blue, I don't know, that is just amazing to me. And that too is something to celebrate. So I think, Peter, you need to move next door to Georgia. So anyway, what I want to say is this election has never been about partisan politics. I'm sorry, guys, I got to get another page. It's been about morality, about character, about good versus evil. That's really what it's been about. It's been about character, decency. Character and decency won. Goodness won. We fought fascism and we got our democracy back. So these 4 years gave rise to so many grassroots. The good thing, this is the good thing. There have been good things coming out of this. It really gave rise to so many grassroots movements. We got indivisible, which is how basically I got started with WWNR immediately a week after the election. These young staffers who worked for the Obama campaign put out this incredible booklet, really, how-to booklet on how to organize, what to do, how to work from the inside. And that's how that was the birth of WWNR. I really took from them. And they're two young people who live in Brooklyn, and they started this whole movement. Then we had Swing Left. Then we had Postcards to Voters, which is something I latched onto and started working with them to get out just thousands of postcards. And then it started out with issues, really with issues in the first days, weeks, months of the Trump presidency. And then it turned into Get Out the Vote for 2018. We did a lot of Get Out the Vote postcards, phone calling, and these last years, months, weeks, days have been getting out the vote for this this election. And people ask me, do you think the postcards really work? Do you think this really works? And yes, it does. I mean, it was Get Out the Vote. I mean, we were just one of thousands of groups doing this. It wasn't just the postcards, but the postcards, the texting, the phone calls. I mean, don't forget, we couldn't go door to door. We couldn't have face-to-face conversations with people. So how could we make a difference? The only way we could really make a difference was through postcards, through letter writings. And I also want to give a hand to Gwen Levine and our newest member, Gail Levinson, because the two of them also started a group where they were and are still writing letters. And so they also got thousands of letters out. So, so hats off to them for doing this work. So Postcards to Voters, Vote Forward, Reclaim Our Vote, which is something that the AEU latched onto, and Reclaim Our Vote, by the way, I'm very excited about this group because they, together with Stacey Abrams and her group, Fair Fight, their issue is voter reform and the right to vote, and really looking at how we vote in this country and changing that. I mean, I don't know if it's possible to change the Electoral College. I think you need 2/3 in Congress or whatever that is. Ron knows that, but that is an issue that I'm kind of gonna latch onto, because the way our Electoral College is so unfair. So that's a group, Reclaim Our Vote, Fair Fight, and others. So hundreds of thousands, if not millions, joined these groups and resisted. Together, we overcame evil. Yet, as Joe pointed out in something he wrote recently, we didn't win by the landslide we expected. Now that, as much as we should take this time to celebrate, and we have to celebrate, we cannot lose sight of the fact, not at all, that we have a very divided country. Over 70, and this has been the biggest shock for me, over 70 million people in this country voted for Donald Trump, voted for a corrupt sociopath, immoral. And we may know somewhat what that might be about. It's a sad, sad, sad truth. I think for me, it challenges my humanism, my ability to really understand that. So that's a challenge I think we all face. I did not expect that. I did think it would be more of a landslide. Certainly didn't expect that more people, so many more people, would come out and vote for him than they did in 2016. So that's something that, I think we have to wrap our heads around, and it's really hard to comprehend. So those are my words, and some of my thoughts, some of my feelings, the pros and the cons that came out of this, the 4 years of horror, really. I mean, it was like surreal. So I think now what I would like to do is give everybody else an opportunity to talk. And again, I mentioned in the beginning how 4 years ago we came together. Joe, within weeks after the election, he felt that people really needed to come together to talk and express their feelings. And it was different. It was different because we were all very much in a depression, and I think really in shock. And I remember sitting in that circle. I remember so clear. I remember where I was sitting, and the worry and the tears and what was happening to our country. I mean, it was palpable. And then of course the process of the last 4 years. So I think when this platform was planned and they asked me to do it, none of us knew which way this election was going to go, whether we were going to be sitting here and saying, oh my God, where are we going to go live? Because Donald Trump got reelected. I think that was a fear we all had. I certainly did. Or if we were going to be celebrating and we were going to see an end to Donald Trump. So we've seen an end to Donald Trump for sure, even though he's tweeting and he's in his alternate reality and he thinks he can fight this. From everything I am hearing and reading, he doesn't have a case. The fear that Peter is facing, Peter Kosouris, who lives in South Carolina, and there is a lot of worry for how he's going to incite his supporters. So that's a worry we have. And but democracy is working, and we saw that, and we should celebrate that. So when I think about the discussion about where we can go with it, I want to give people the opportunity to speak about just anything they feel they want to talk about, anything at all, and how they were coping with these 4 years, how they're feeling now, any questions you might have, maybe somebody else can answer, really anything at all. But here are just a few ideas to think about. So one is, how have you coped or changed during these 4 years? For me, we all have our own defense mechanism. There's the flight or fight, phenomenon. For me, I went right into immediately fight mode and stayed there. It's a coping mechanism. For others, they felt they had to retreat and they just couldn't deal with it. And sometimes you go back and forth between the two. So we all have different coping mechanisms. And, that's one aspect of this, is how we all coped with this. And if it changed us in any way, if these 4 years really changed us in a significant way. So that's something to think about. How has your humanism been challenged? I know that I've discussed this. Diana Gross and I, who were co-chairs of the membership committee, we've been friends for years, and we kind of met through ethical culture. Throughout this, talked a lot about, my God, Donald Trump. We believe we have to work to bring out the best in each of us by bringing out the best in ourselves, right? How do you do that? That's a whole platform discussion. But what Donald Trump has done and what this administration has done, it's managed to bring out the worst in all of us. What are the worst? I mean, we've wished death on people, sometimes. And it's so divided, this country. So So this has been just a personal challenge for me, and also how we deal with our relatives and our friends who are Trump supporters. How do we continue to have, sorry, my daughter-in-law's mother's calling me, I was distracted. So that's something to think about, just how your humanism has been challenged, how you've changed in these 4 years. Another question just to look at, to think about, is how do we justify the inherent good in human beings when we have 70 million Americans who've voted for Donald Trump? And this isn't new in history. I mean, if you look at our history, this has happened before. This isn't new, but yet I don't think we've seen it. I haven't lived it in my lifetime. So that's a question, that I grapple with. Another question, Joe Biden talks about unifying the country. Is this possible? How is he going to do that? So, and then of course, how we as humanists, as a congregation, how we move forward. What is our obligation? What is our commitment to continuing this? Because I know, I've been changed by becoming more active and knowing this is my lifetime now. This is, we have to be sure this isn't going to happen again. This did not happen overnight. Trumpism didn't happen overnight. The seeds were planted for Trump. So we can't ever let this happen again. And so we have to maintain our commitment. So how do we do that? So these are just some thoughts for our discussion, but I want to open it to talking about anything, and we'll let it go for, it's 11:30. So we've got a good half hour. So I think because we have 52 participants, it'll depend on how many people do want to speak. But I would say, when you do talk, just be considerate. And I want people to feel free to express themselves. But if you see a lot of hands up there on the screen, just be mindful of that we do want to try to give everybody a chance who wants to speak. So with that, I will leave it to Lenny to again talk about raising your hands. He will recognize you. You'll have to unmute yourself. He'll explain it, and then we'll proceed with just having a discussion.
Thank you, Lisa. The one thing I neglected to say, if you are dialed in and you want to raise your hand, you need to press *9, and to unmute or mute your phone, you press *6. So that's *9 to raise your hand, *6 to unmute or mute your phone. So Pamela, you're first. You can unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you so much, Lisa. Thank you, everybody in Ethical Culture. This has been a really hard few weeks for me, especially this past week. I was so stressed by one time it's going up and one time they favor Trump, and the back and forth and constant newscasts about who's leading, who's not leading, and Trump's declaring fraud. And I believe that we have a lot of work to do. We've got to undo everything that Trump has done. And so as a humanist, it makes me more aware of what we need as a community, what kind of social action we need to pursue. Personally, I feel so wonderful that Biden is going to be our next president, but I'm also scared about what's going to happen with Trump. What evil is he going to pass on and continue to hurt this world? And what's going to happen with like COVID? So right now I have such a mixed emotions and scared yet relieved. And I believe that the only reason that Trump won in 2016 was because Hillary Clinton ran against him. And we were not ready for a woman president. Mm-hmm. And we did not realize how bad Trump was. Remember, Trump was a celebrity. He was had his own program. He was a billionaire, and everybody thought, oh, this is great. We're going to have a businessman run our country. And I was so disappointed as things got worse and worse and worse. So I'm going to say, as a humanist, I want to do more. Tell me what I can do in the organization. Tell me what I can do in ethical culture that will help me make a difference in our world.
Okay, thank you, Pam. Yeah, and we will do that. I know Ron and I still are going to be active, so this is something we will discuss and through social action. Thank you.
All right, Steve Solom. You can unmute yourself.
That was Karen Buzzard who had her hand raised. She'll be there in a minute.
Okay. Do you want me to go? I can come back to. All right. Well, let's move on to. Let's go on to Ed Gross, and then we'll come back.
Okay.
Oh, there you go. All right. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
So do you want to come back or?
No.
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay. All right. I was just going to say one thing that has struck me was the change, since I'm a professor of media and communication, was the change in I think the shout out to the media and how they wised up in terms of their coverage of Trump was tremendous, because when he first became president, they just put out his messages unfiltered, just like a traditional president. And I think what we've seen, is them all coming together, the journalists, all the different media, and really critically analyzing what he's putting forward. I know even at the end, they cut away from a speech he was trying to announce his victory. I think they really stepped up and played their role in a democracy, which they should have. And I think we owe a huge shout out to them, even though they're often criticized. And I also want to give a big shout out to Lisa and Ron for all they did to help bring people together and fight against what was happening during these last 4 years.
Great. Ed Gross, you're next.
I will speak, but Diana will speak first.
Oh, okay. One of the questions you proposed, Lisa, was how have you changed since the election? And I will say that although I had a Facebook account, I never ever used it, and I felt stupid about Facebook. I didn't know what to do. I never used it. The morning after the election, I woke up in bed, took my phone, and got on Facebook, and immediately figured out how to use it. And it gave me such comfort to be with my own peeps, people who felt as I did. So I became active on Facebook. And one of the tropes that I've been seeing is the one that says, look, it's only an election. This isn't worth losing friends over. We can agree to disagree. And whenever I see that, I always stand witness and say, no, this is not just an election. This second election that where Trump stood to be the president of the United States for another 4 years, this election was one in which people who voted for Trump knew what he was going to do. The last time, they didn't know. We knew he was bad. He was, incapable. He was a false alarm, so to speak, and he frightened us. But this time, we know what he's capable of. And the people, the 70-some million people who chose to vote for babies being kidnapped and all the other terrible things that Trump has done and represented, white supremacy, dog whistles, supporting the kidnapping of a sitting governor. This was unconscionable. To me, a vote for Trump was unconscionable in so many ways. So I I continue to stand in against those tropes that are saying it's only an election. People need to change their friends' minds, or at least say, I'm sorry, you voted for these ignominious policies. And that this is not politics. This is morality. This is patriotism. This is democracy. And I think that that's where we are right now, looking at 70 some million people who can overlook the past 4 years for whatever reason. So I don't know that those people can have their minds changed. I don't know that that's going to happen. That's what scares me the most. People who knowingly voted for Trump.
Yeah. I want to pick up right there, actually. I've been thinking an awful lot about the people who voted for Trump. And it seems to me, and you know, a lot of people want to blame the Democrats. We didn't do this right or that right. They didn't do this right or that right or whatever. And it seems to me that there's just a huge number of unavailable votes in this country, that people who belong to cults, religious cults, people who belong to, who are members of some of the white evangelical churches, even Hispanic evangelical churches, people who are practicing Catholics who go to Mass every Sunday,
Single issue voters.
and single issue voters like the gun voters and the abortion voters and such. There's an awful lot of those people who aren't looking at the election and saying, well, there's this guy and he stands for this, and there's that guy and he stands for that. So, and weighing it and making a decision. Yes, there were undecided voters up to the last. There always are. Those are people we have to be concerned about. But I do believe that the vast majority of these 70 million voters weren't looking at it as a choice. They were looking at it as, I have no choice. I have to vote for the guy who represents my group, who represents my one issue. And that's sad, but in a way, it makes me feel better that people aren't weighing these two things that are so vastly different, which is sort of like weighing good against bad and deciding on bad. I don't excuse them, but I think that if we can understand them and sort of dismiss them as part of the electorate and focus on the remainder of the electorate, it's just a smarter approach. That's my feeling.
Okay, next is Beth Stein. You can unmute yourself.
Got it. Okay, me or you?
Go ahead.
All right. I have to say that even more disturbing than Trump himself, if such a thing is indeed possible, is how upsetting it is to see that such a large proportion of our country would sit still for this. And then having experienced it and having it no longer be an abstract, but actually having lived through 4 years of this, would be willing to look the other way and vote for him again.
No,
It's very hurtful to me, and this is along the lines of what Diana said. But I know that my question is, it's an internal dialogue within my own head. Of on one hand, I know that there needs to be a healing, and I know that there's a deep rift in our country. But on the other hand, there is a certain point that the go along, get along mentality just simply doesn't work. There are lines that just can't be crossed. So how do you approach someone from the other side and bring them along? Because if you just get in their face and just say, you're wrong, that's not a way to bring them along. So how do you approach the unapproachable? I mean, this is what I'm constantly pondering in my own head, of just how do you approach these people that are willing to just look the other way and bring them along? Because, you know, this needs to be corrected. We can't go on like this indefinitely. And, you know, clearly almost half the country went for it again. So there's, you know, getting rid of Trump doesn't get rid of the problem. It's basically my concern.
Okay. Gwen, you're next. You can unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I just want to mention I have something right in front of me here. Last Sunday morning when I was taking my walk, this is before the election, I decided there were 4 really urgent issues regardless of who won. And I'd like to just mention them because I think if we get another dictator in the making as president, we need protections. What really blew me away is how much trouble Trump made and that nothing held him accountable. And I thought there's something wrong with our government if someone can break all the rules and get away with it. So these are the 4 things that came to mind. I've already shared this with Lisa and 1 or 2 other friends. One is gerrymandering because it's used to achieve political advantage and racial disadvantage. It's bad in every way. The other is the Electoral College, because it focuses on only a handful of swing states, thus inviting election disruptions, voter suppression, manipulating ballots. And, you know, electors are not bound by the popular vote. A governor could tell them to vote some other way. It's terrifying. The other is the appointment of the Attorney General. As long as the president appoints the Attorney General, then the Attorney General is not independent and can't be trusted to hold the president accountable. I don't know who would appoint or elect an Attorney General, but it shouldn't be the president, because this time it really, really backfired. And the final thing is something that I understand Dwight Panazzo will be speaking about on November 29th, which is the allocation of 2 senators per state. We see how important the Senate is in their confirmation of Supreme Court justices and whatever. California has over 39 million people who have 2 senators. Wyoming has just over 500,000 people, and they have 2 senators. So the heavily populated states are severely underrepresented in the Senate. And I think those 4 things, gerrymandering, the Electoral College, the appointment of the Attorney General, and the allocation of senators, has got to change to hold our democracy in one piece and not let it be broken up by another Trump. That's it.
Thank you, Gwen. Yeah, I wrote those down, and I just want to say a few words. I know we have other hands up, but yeah, I think those are definitely issues to look at. Some of them may be more complicated than others and maybe more long-term, such as changing the Electoral College, because that's where voting comes in. Because in some of these you need like 2/3, and if it requires a constitutional amendment, some of the things. So that's something, we would definitely need more, more information on how we go about doing that. But I think that you're right. We need to change. There's something very wrong in our government that we were able to get this, and we can't let it happen again. So thank you. Thanks a lot. Lenny, do you want to? Oh. Lenny, we can't hear you.
Here I am. I'm sorry. Karen Lee, you're next. Unmute yourself.
Hello?
Hello.
Okay. 2 things. One, certainly this election gives me a lot of hope. It's been hard to get through 4 years of this, but I'm very glad the election turned out, and I do encourage everybody to take a minute and to take a deep breath and to celebrate what we all have achieved. But I've been studying politics since Jimmy Carter, and I think I have a realistic view of what is going to happen in the future. I just want to say that I think we do have to take seriously that there are a lot of people in this country who have been suffering, who feel like both parties have not really been paying attention I have family members who live in very rural areas of this country. And I've heard stories from them about how they've been suffering. There used to be jobs and they don't have jobs anymore. You know, just a lot of pain, a lot of problems in places which don't necessarily look like New Jersey, New York. And a lot of people in those areas voted for someone, you know, voted for Trump because they felt like he seemed to tap into how they were feeling. They didn't necessarily agree with everything he was saying and doing, but they just felt like he seemed to be one of the few people out there who was running for president who seemed to be able to talk about the things that they were afraid of, the anger that they felt about how they were suffering, and nobody seemed to be doing anything about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Allison Goldstein, please unmute yourself. You have something to say?
Did that unmute?
Yes.
Yay. Lenny, I'm really proud of you. But that's not what I wanted to say. My moment of trauma unequivocally was the Charlottesville moment. As a Jew growing up in the United States, I learned from the earliest age that I had had relatives in concentration camps. And as disturbing as that was, the way that I was able to sort of cope with that legacy was the fact that I lived in the United States. And that moment where Charlottesville was replayed incessantly on TV, it undermined all my confidence that living in America gave me some, for lack of a better term, some level of protection. Suddenly I realized, doesn't matter if it's America, there are people out there who would like me dead. And I don't know that I ever rebounded from that moment. I mean, I've gone on with my life. I've laughed and had a good time and enjoyed life. But that was one of those moments, it's always really, really close. It could be triggered at any given moment. And it's going to take a long time for a lot of us to heal from things like that. It's not just the change of a president.
Right.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Peter? Unmute yourself. Yep.
Yes. Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Yeah, I'm so happy to finally have this. Hopefully this voice, you know, that we've been hearing every day and every week, gone. I mean, this voice has been destructive in so many on so many levels. Some good stuff has come up here, and I love what Gwen was saying and what Karen was saying, and you know, just to speak with about the appeal of Trump. You know, it's interesting because, you know, I do have a new perspective living down here and listening to people, and I think listening really needs to be done to heal the divide. But you've got two really conflicting viewpoints. You've got Joe's talk last week, the blueprint for America, which is beautiful. I mean, it's like gorgeous, but you've got a whole different mindset going on that could so completely care less about Joe's blueprint for America. Trust me. You know, Trump believes in power. Trump believes in America first. Trump believes in, you know, this whole notion of power. And of course, there's a racist element that's huge, that's very appealing. But I've got some really, and this is my big concern, I've got some really great people in my life that support Trump. And I mean that when I say they're really great people and they're intelligent. And, you know, Alan Berger and I were talking about this yesterday. I really need to listen to them, you know, if we're going to heal this divide. I find it really difficult though, because they believe in this vision of America, like Trump was putting America first. And that notion is so strong for them. The fact that you had this man doing that, we can hear through our own lens, we can see the world in one way. But when he was doing that, it was such a simple and direct message for many people. And it was very appealing. I personally have a lot of trouble with it. But that's the dialogue that needs to start, because these folks are not gonna, they're not even gonna be close to Joe's blueprint for America. I mean, in my discussions with them, I mentioned facets of that speech that Joe gave last week, and they're not even near that page. It's a totally different ballpark. But I need to listen. I need to take the cotton out of my ears. So a couple things I think also really need to change systemically. I was disappointed with some of the celebrations I saw yesterday, with people holding signs that said F Trump, you know the words, people without masks, some of the things that we're, a lot of people are concerned with the Republicans. I'm seeing a lot of the same behaviors, because there's always a few bad apples. I don't like also I don't want to take too much time, but I don't like that the way the system works with, you win Senate, you win the House, you now have your will. That's not the way this republic was designed. You're supposed to represent your constituencies. And I don't like the way this, it's a great system, no doubt, but there are systems that are actually, I think, a little better these days if you look to Europe and Scandinavia. And I would love to see some democratic socialist agenda starting. I don't like the filibuster. I don't like the electoral college system really needs revamping. So it's kind of rambling a bit, but I would really like to see more listening done. Thank you.
Thank you. Linda Bennett, you're next. Unmute yourself.
Okay. Actually, I want to pick up exactly on what Peter was saying, but several other people have said before. To a certain extent, as people have been commenting, it's like, who are these crazies who can believe these conspiracy theories and so on? If we treat, it goes back to what Biden said, if we treat our opponents as enemies, we're never going to get anywhere. They are opponents. Some of them are reachable. Some of them forget, they're not, but some of them are reachable. But what concerns me is to what extent we're not stepping back and examining ourselves. To what extent do we have a knee-jerk reaction to everything that comes up on social media or on what we consider mainstream media, which is basically anti-Trump? The latest outrage. I think the minute you see the word outrage, your radar should go up and say, wait a minute, stop. Outrage is going to automatically shut off my thinking capacities, my ability to rationalize, my ability to make sense of something. And too often, I think we fall into the trap of allowing ourselves to be manipulated, even if we feel it's in a good cause. There are other people that we could work with. I'll give you just one example. There's a lot of disagreement over healthcare. But if you ask the majority of Americans, do you want people protected from discrimination against pre-existing conditions? Do you want them protected against surprise medical bills? Do you believe people should have either, I don't know if you call the phrasing could be, in question to say a right to medical care. But seriously, if you say, if you look at it and sit down with people and say, people are being driven into bankruptcy, they're losing their homes and so on, because they can't pay their medical bills. Do you agree that this isn't right? We could do something about it. I think we would find that there are a lot of people that would be on board with that, not necessarily, the devil's in the details, not necessarily easy to agree on exactly how to do it. But that gets away from the conspiracy theories and everything else. It focuses on a real problem, a real potential that we could do something. It's just that I urge you that anytime you see outrage, call into question what you're reading. We saw Trump voters saying, Biden will never be my president. He's not my president. He'll never be my president. Well, what were we saying 4 years ago? Trump will never be my president. Not necessarily nice to hear our own biases. You want to tell them, look, you got to accept it. Well, did we accept it 4 years ago? I'm not saying we should necessarily, but they're only echoing exactly what we did. So I'd like to turn down the outrage button and look for what do we need to get done and how we could do it. My 2 cents.
Thank you, Linda.
Yeah, thank you. Lenny, let me just, in the interest of time, I'm just looking. I can't see how many hands are up at this
I have 3, 6, 8 hands up.
Wow. Okay. All right. So I guess I'm trying to, I know I just looked on, it says we aim to end by between 12:20 and 12:30. It's 12:05. What we could do is, this discussion could go on for a while, and there are some great ideas, and I do want to give everybody the opportunity to be able to talk. So I'm wondering if we maybe can continue for another 10 minutes here, so everybody has a chance to hear what others have to say, or we can go into the breakout room for those who want to continue the discussion, but then it'll be just the ones who want to be in there and everybody won't hear. So I'm not sure which way to go with this. My inclination is to say, let's give it 10 more minutes.
Okay.
And if everybody who's left, just be mindful that we have 8 more people who want to talk. So I want to give everybody the opportunity because there's some great ideas here. I'm taking notes. So let's try to give it another 10 minutes.
Okay. First of all, Steve, I do hear that you are trying to get, I will keep you in mind. I will call on you for sure. Just give me a few minutes, okay? Next is Edna and Laszlo. If you could unmute yourself.
Yeah, okay. I want to say, I felt, since I was born right after the war, I felt this election was like somewhat similar to what was happening in 1933 in Germany, that, fascism and, Hitler and the other side were, the Democratic side or the leftist side was fighting it out, and he won with a very thin margin. And I was wondering whether this time is going to be again, whether the fascist side or the more liberal side is going to win out. And I'm not sure that this victory is actually guarantees anything in history. And if you look around the world, I think the question is more global, that we have to answer about what humanity actually predicted Trump's victory just by being somewhat more global than most people in 2016. Because I had this argument with everybody, because I looked around and said, there's a trend in the world, and it's hard to, that's a question of actually humanism, which is based on human rationality, whether that's one of those absolutes that we put our trust in and makes us feel superior of others. You know, that's that superiority that comes out of our view of our humanism, that we are superior because we are rational. And that's also, I'd say, is in a certain way part of our irrationality, to realize, to be extremely trusting in that. I don't have any answers. I mean, the only answer is, of course, we would continue to try to be a compassionate, loving, caring world that cares not just about America. Patriotism, for example, for me is a very negative, a relatively negative feeling. It just expresses the limit that, you know, that would much better work at a global caring for humanity, for each other. You know, things have to realize that's what's going on in China. Economically, we may have a tremendous fight very, very soon that could result in war between China and the United States as economic competition continues and sharpens in the world. So the problems are not, you know, it's of course, I'm relieved. I was just as sleepless as everybody else when this thing was happening. But I think we have to look at foundations very, very deeply. I used to be, I would say, and I'm not going to continue that because, you know, but I think.
Thank you. Yeah, I think a lot of us, I think that's part of the problem. There's a lot of complacency and we can't ever be anymore. I think that's what changed me. That's how I changed. So yeah, thank you.
But I want to say something as well. A few weeks ago, before the election, I spoke to one of my mother's last living friends. My mother passed away 2 years ago, but this is her last friend that I'm still in contact with. And we had never talked politics before, and somehow it came up, and she said she was planning to vote for Trump. And I spoke to her and I said, but what about all these awful things that he's been doing over the last 4 years? And I also asked her whether she voted for him last time, and she said yes. My mother, on the other hand, when Trump announced his candidacy, she was still around, and she said, no way, this guy can't possibly become our president. And she just thought it was a joke. Anyway, so fast forward, so we hung up the phone that time, and I was kind of down, and Laszlo kept saying to me, well, call her and, you know, see if you can get her to change her mind. And I didn't do it until election day. And by then she told me that she had already gone out to vote. However, she had changed her vote. She did not vote for Trump because she had talked to one of her relatives in Germany who mentioned to her, now this friend is a Holocaust survivor. I think she must have survived in Germany until after the war, at which point she went to Israel. And that's where my parents met her.
She voted for Trump because she felt that Trump was out.
Right, she felt that Trump was kind of supporting Israel. That was her big thing after surviving the horrors of the Holocaust. She felt Israel was really the last place that she could feel safe if ever she needed to. And so, but then she found out from this nephew that Kamala Harris's husband is Jewish, and that gave her the reason to vote for Biden. You just never know, you know, this. She knew all these awful things about Trump, and yet there was that one issue that. So
yeah.
I don't know how to explain it, but anyway.
Yeah, but I can't explain it. I want to cut off a little bit and just to see if there's anybody else, Lenny.
I have 7, 8. Actually, I still have 8 people. If what is it, 10 after? Do you want to go another 10 minutes? And
I can. I mean, it's, you know, I guess people could stay on who want to.
Yeah, let's go for another few more, and we'll go from there. How's that?
Okay.
All right, Sarah Glass, you can unmute yourself.
Hi, I wanted to underscore something. I'll talk fast because I know we have a lot of people. Underscore something that Karen said about things we don't see that much in New Jersey. The massive closing of factories in the Midwest and other places with outsourced jobs gave people tremendous agita, and they were looking for somebody to blame. And I think that helped elect Trump enormously. Another thing very quickly, we now have a QAnon member of Congress, and that's just shocking. I just wanted to, make sure everyone was aware of the fact, the QAnon, they believe that the Democratic Party is involved in a worldwide range of pedophilia, and the fact that someone could get elected with those beliefs now is very concerning. Her name is Marjorie Taylor Greene, and she has the House seat in the Congress coming out of Georgia. Very, very concerning. Lisa, when she first introduced the topic, mentioned all of the human rights violations that Trump was involved in, separating kids from their families and demonizing minorities and all of those things. I'm hoping that the World Court will consider those crimes against humanity and perhaps will move to prosecute Trump for crimes against humanity based on those human rights violations. The last thing I wanted to say is, as an environmentalist, I have been heartbroken these past 4 years watching Trump reverse all of our protections, drilling in the Arctic Wildlife Sanctuary, pouring coal dust waste into rivers again, which had all these things which we had protection against. He's wrecked, and hopefully we can recover from that. That's it.
Thank
Thank you, Janet. Yeah.
Steve, if you want to unmute yourself, Solomon.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to speak. So many thoughts arise. I just wanted to expand one thing on the thing Karen was saying earlier about television. And it took them till the very end of the campaign to realize that they've been used by Trump as a megaphone. And he, it was part of his whole shtick. And I really saw that. And it came to an insight that how much television normalized his abnormality. It became normal. And it's so nice that we got through that. And it's sort of interesting. I just wanted to bring up a personal anecdote. I guess I'm sort of wandering, but other people wandered. But my supervisor at work is a person who's Black and dark Black, not light Black. He's dark Black. I think that also has some bearing. But, and he's the only one there in this group of at least 15 people who's Black, and he has to supervise them. And he never has really talked about that. And then after the not Eric Gardner, the, what was the one that brought the worldwide protest? George Floyd.
Right.
And he brought it up in the staff meeting, and I was sort of surprised because he always gave the impression of being immune from the prejudices that we all know. And he talked about real experiences growing up where he faced overt discrimination against his family and so forth and so on. So I was impressed with that, and I actually personally communicated with him that I thanked him for, it's just kind of making it real. For a lot of white people, I think it's not totally real, that the position of being a person of color in the society. And so now that made a worldwide protest all over the world, not even in this country, all over the world. People went to the streets. They were so outraged. To me, it was like, I'm Jewish. It was like as horrifying as the Holocaust to watch this on television, this person having their life taken away by a policeman. But happily, we saw an event on the opposite side yesterday where celebration spontaneously broke out everywhere. I mean, even the biggest Scrooge, you couldn't help being happy when you saw that this was coming to an end. It was just amazing. Cities everywhere, people started celebrating. So that was kind of nice. And I just had one more thought. I hate to bring on a down note, but I have to disagree with Linda. is when you're faced with somebody who's a total despot, who's so horrible, I think the only response is to resist. I think, I don't think there's any way, you can say, oh, we have to call him president. I felt funny calling him President Trump. It didn't fit for me.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you. Ron, it's your turn.
Speaking very, very quickly, of all the things that have impacted me with the Trump presidency, two things have impacted me the most. One is very negative, one is rather positive. The negative thing is to realize through Trump how incredibly racist our society still is after all these years and our failure to correct the original sin of slavery, and how naive some of us were back in 2008 when we hugged and kissed each other with the Obama presidency, thinking that we had turned a corner as a country in this regard. We haven't. And in some respects, it has gotten worse as maybe a backlash to the Obama presidency. And also in regards to that, how law enforcement continues to be an incredibly racist part of our governing, and how that has to change by the will of the people telling prosecutors that these white police officers who don't value the lives of Black men and Black people have to be prosecuted and have to be convicted. The second thing that has really struck me, and it's a positive one, is how Trump has brought out millions of activists as people who have never been active in campaigns before. Both Lisa and I have been active in politics now for 50 years, and we have never, ever seen this type of activism. And the point is, we have to keep this going. This has to be a new paradigm for everybody here on the Zoom today and around the country. We have to be ever vigilant, and not just vigilant, but continue the activism that we have seen in the last couple of years. So please stay active. Don't go back into your non-activist closet, and stay with us. Thanks.
Excellent.
Thanks, Ron.
Carol and Jonathan, unmute yourself, please.
You're speaking very quickly as well. I know you're limited time.
Carol here.
Can you hear me?
Carol is here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, Carol. Hi.
Hi.
Okay. I've had a theory for quite a long time.
Carol, wait. Somebody else is talking?
Oh, no, I called, I'm sorry. Yeah, Carol Gottlieb. Yes, I did not call, I didn't mean to call on you. There was another Carol before you. So if you can mute yourself, I will call you next, okay?
Okay, this is
okay.
Carol.
Which Carol is supposed to? Was it Carol and Jonathan?
Good. You're good. You can go.
It's Carol and Jonathan. Okay. Well, this is Carol, part of Carol and Jonathan, and just very quickly, because I know there's very limited time. I just want to say that there's a lot to say that I could say, but I'll keep it very quick. I felt so much really hope last night. There was a real it was a wonderful feeling, and it's been a really terrible 4 years. And I just want to say I have to bring my mother here into the room, because my mother, Amy, was a member for a very long time. And I thought of her last night, and I wish she could be here with us today. Oh. And the joy she would have felt, and the hope, and the tears.
Oh, yeah.
And also I saw the horror that both my parents saw. They both passed away within the last 2 years. I think it was awful for them to see what had happened. And it makes me realize, growing up how I did and seeing all the work that they did and all the hope that I saw, I guess I knew there was work still and things go wrong, but I never realized how much was still so wrong and how much there really is to do. When I saw how heartbroken they were to see this happen, and it just makes me, I have all the hope and I see all that, and I also see how much there really is to do. So I just wanted to say that with everyone here, with my mother in mind. needed to say that. And I know we're all feeling a lot of those things. And I'm looking forward to all the possibilities. And I see, you know, what that is a wake-up call. So thanks everyone for being here.
Thank you, Carol, and thank you for bringing your mom into us. I can just imagine how joyful she would be at this. Yeah, thank you.
Lisa, I got 3 more, so we'll get the, well, 3 through.
All right, 3 more, and then we'll call
Okay,
it.
Carol Gottlieb, you can now unmute yourself.
Carol? Oh, there she is.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can.
This is Carol. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay. Carol, I knew your mother, Amy Hausner, for many years, and we were friends. She even called me from Vermont once. So a lot of us still think of your mother. Now to my subject. For quite a long time now, I've had a theory. I don't know how true it is, but I heard that there are over 4,000 lawsuits against Donald Trump. Now, I believe when he steps down, Donald Trump is going to skip. He's going to make it out of this country to avoid all these lawsuits. I don't know where he's going to go. I don't think it's going to be Russia. I don't think Russia wants him. But this is what I believe. I don't believe he will hang around to face these lawsuits in court after he brings his own lawsuits and loses, because his own lawsuits now have been thrown out of court, one after another. So I don't know if anybody has thought along these lines, but this is what I believe.
Yeah, he
Thank
may.
you.
I think he may split, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Diane Kozarski.
Oh, thank you. Even if Donald Trump leaves the country, he leaves behind 70 million Americans who agreed with him in some measure. And unless we're ready to have government by executive decree, which we were very angry when Trump perpetrated government that way, and then 4 years later, because combating misogyny in this country is a giant uphill battle, whether Harris or another Democrat can be victorious in 4 years. Big question. We have to do something to find common ground with some of those 70 million Americans. The Irish peace process depended on finding common ground. Presumably Palestinians may someday be able to find common ground with Israelis. It doesn't mean giving up on very crucial, essential core values, but there has to be some way to make some pragmatic progress in governing by listening and communing with, half of the country, almost half the country. We can't just be triumphant and know it all going forward. We need to consider our crazy relatives. That's my only point. Thank you.
Thank you. And last but not least, Eric, go ahead.
Oh, hi. Thank you. Well, then maybe I'll end on an upbeat note, which is just that 4 years ago when Trump was elected, I remember thinking, oh man, it's going to be a long 4 years. And it has been. And, it hasn't, there've been some good things that we've seen in the last 4 years too. Again, Black Lives Matter, the Me Too movement, the criminal justice reform, and a whole variety of things that have moved forward despite. But what I want to say is 4 years ago, I remember thinking, oh my God, are we going to end up in a, you know, a shooting war with China? Are we going, you know, what's all the, I guess, doomsday scenarios? And while it's been a tough 4 years, we made it. We made it through. So everybody, let's celebrate, you know, and we don't have to go through another 4 years. The last thing I'll just add, you know, I think I've heard a lot of people talk about fascism, and there is certainly fascism, but underlying that for me is the foundation of that is nationalism. And I think that we all fall into that nationalist trap, and sometimes it is a matter of degree. And I'm glad to see that President-elect Biden said that one of the first things he's going to do is to put us back into the Paris Accords. And I think it's that type of global engagement that is really where we can differentiate and still maintain a love of our country and a nationalism, but really put a positive alternative to the nationalism that does express itself often as America first and as fascism. So that's all I'll say. Anyway, thank you.
Eric. Okay. Well, wow. We have a lot of really great comments and a lot of thoughts that were shared. We're coming to an end. I did take notes on some of the things that people said, and I hope maybe if there's a need, we could come back and continue this at some other point, maybe not for a Sunday platform. But I think what's important is where we go from here. What's our obligation as humanists and grappling with these issues that we're all grappling with. So I want to leave you with, I think it's relevant. And I also want to honor this great woman, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I know we don't in ethical necessarily believe in angels, but I believe she's one of our angels. And I want to leave you with a quote, and it's relevant. We must criticize without wounding and debate without dehumanizing our opponents. Fight for the things that you care about, but do it in a way that will lead others to join you. And that's our challenge. When Diane and others said that we have to find a way to reach at least some of these 70 million people. That's our challenge. How do we do that? How do we change minds? How do we speak to them without dehumanizing them? They've done it to us, but we can't stoop to that level. So I think it's a great quote, and that's what I want to leave you with.